Good morning, fifth grade. So we are going to start on chapter 6, lesson 1 today, talking about the Articles of Confederation. So we're going to read, it says, what was the Articles of Confederation and why did it fail? So here are your lesson outcomes. So ask yourself, what am I learning? Well, in this lesson, you're going to use your investigative skills to explore the Articles of Confederation. Why am I learning it? Well, reading and talking about the laws passed in the Articles will help you understand the process that led to the creation of the United States Constitution. And then how will I know that I learned it? You will be able to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the first constitutional document of the United States. So we're going to talk about the pros and the cons of the Articles of Confederation. So that's what we're going to read to find out. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at exploring the pros and cons. So eventually we're going to fill out this chart here together, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Let's go ahead and look at how can I work my way through the text to find these things. So it says asking questions about what you read will allow you to judge the positive and negative outcomes of historical events. So number one, it's saying let's read the text all the way through. So this is the best way to understand what the text is about. So not just reading it in bits and pieces, but reading it all the way through. Okay, then it says answer who, what, where, and when. So write down the dates, places, events, and people mentioned in the text. Number 3 says to make inferences about the historical reasons for an event. So sometimes the author directly explains how and why something happened. Other times, you will have to make an inference or an educated guess. So you're going to combine your prior knowledge with what you read in the text to understand the context of the events mentioned in the text. And then lastly, we're going to identify the positive and negative effects. So it says once you've answered the questions about a text, you can use the information to list the pros, the positives, and the cons, the negatives, that resulted from the historical events that you've read about. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on this chart a little bit later. All right, so starting with lesson 1, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the timeline. So let's start with 1776. We have the Declaration of Independence signed, and the Second Continental Congress creates the Articles of Confederation. And then in 1777, we have the United States starts operating under the Articles. 1781, the Articles are ratified or approved by all 13 states. In 1786 to 87, we have Shays' Rebellion. And then in 1787, we have the Northwest Ordinance is passed and the Constitutional Convention begins. We'll read a little bit more about Shays' Rebellion, but this is a picture. It says Daniel Shays led farmers in a rebellion against the government in Massachusetts. So we're going to read to find out why he led a rebellion. All right, here we go. We got chapter 6, lesson 1. What was the Articles of Confederation and why did it fail? So one nation or 13 states. So it says the Articles of Confederation was the first written document to establish a United States government. The Second Continental Congress began writing the Articles of Confederation in 1776 and approved it in 1777. However, it was not ratified by all 13 states until 1781. Its writers imagined a nation unlike European countries. They promised a firm league of friendship in which each state was guaranteed its freedom and independence. The Articles granted new powers to the national government. It created a Confederation Congress to govern the country. The Congress created departments of finance, foreign affairs, war, and the post office. The Congress also signed a peace treaty with Great Britain, formally ending the Revolutionary War. The Articles allowed the states to continue to run their own governments independently. States retained the right to print their own money. States also had the authority to tax, while the Confederation Congress did not. By 1786, many of the 13 states had written their own constitutions that challenged the authority of the Articles of Confederation. Meanwhile, the Confederation Congress passed laws controlling the growth of the new country. We have the Northwest Ordinance. Congress organized the settlement of the Northwest Territory under the Articles of Confederation. This territory included land north of the Ohio River and east of the Mississippi River. The government would later divide the Northwest Territory into the states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Congress issued the Northwest Ordinance to help organize the territory. The law defined a strict structure for the settlements. Areas with small populations could vote on legislators. Regions with at least 60,000 adults could register for statehood. The Northwest Territory was divided into rectangular townships. Each township included 36 sections. Large companies bought much of the land in the townships. The companies sold smaller portions to settlers for a profit. Arthur St. Clair ran the Ohio Company. The company owned 1.5 million acres of the Northwest Territory. He became the first governor of the Northwest Territory. In 1783, Congress ruled that after the Revolutionary War, Native Americans no longer held the right to land in the Northwest Territory. The U.S. government began to treat the Native peoples as conquered nations. Congress sent soldiers to the territory to remove Native Americans by force. So this land that they had been living on for years, they no longer were able to live there. They were asked to leave, or they were removed by force because the English settlers, the American settlers, now wanted to stay there. One Army officer reported that settlers regularly attacked and killed groups of Native Americans without government support. To defend themselves, the Miami, Shawnee, and Delaware peoples formed a military alliance. In 1791, Miami chief Little Turtle led an attack on Arthur St. Clair's troops. 900 of the U.S. troops were killed. It was the worst defeat suffered by U.S. soldiers in the history of war against Native Americans. Little Turtle died in one of the battles that followed, but the Native Americans' resistance forced the U.S. government to negotiate peace agreements. The Northwest Ordinance declared that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude was allowed in the Northwest Territory. In the mid-1780s, however, most states outside of the territory still permitted white people to own enslaved people. Even free African Americans had many fewer rights than whites. One right free African Americans did not have was the right to worship in their own churches. Richard Allen founded the first fully independent African American church in Philadelphia in 1794. The African Methodist Episcopal AME Church communities of African American worshipers would go on to build AME churches across the United States. All right, so again, let's look at this map, and it shows that the United States was in green, and then the Northwest Territory, remember everything north of the Ohio River, so up north of the Ohio River and east of the Mississippi River, was the Northwest Territory. A call for stronger government. So the Articles of Confederation eventually proved to be weak in governing the United States as a single nation. Without the backing of a strong national government, American banks often found it difficult to make sure borrowers repaid their loans. In addition, each state maintained its own currency. Merchants and companies struggled to do business in more than one state. Doing so involved understanding highly complicated state laws, as well as confusing differences in the value of states' money. The national government, meanwhile, did not collect taxes. Instead, Congress asked for money from state governments. After the Revolutionary War, Congress needed $15.7 million to pay its debts. The states agreed to pay the national government only $2.4 million. The United States could not afford to pay money owed to someone of the military officials and leaders who had fought in the Revolutionary War. These people became increasingly frustrated with the government's lack of power over the states. So let's continue with this Did You Know? So this picture here was paper money that was issued by the state of Massachusetts. So the U.S. government first issued print money during the Revolutionary War. These bills, called Continental currency, helped pay for the war against the British. Realizing this, the British government printed counterfeit bills and passed them out in the United States. They succeeded in weakening the U.S. government by lowering the worth of the Continental currency. This was the first example of paper money counterfeiting as a form of economic warfare. In the 1780s, the national government's money problems led to violent conflict. Merchants in Boston decided to require that their bills be paid in gold and silver. They thought that the Massachusetts currency was too unstable. When farmers in western Massachusetts could not produce the necessary gold and silver coins to pay off their debts, they were jailed in large numbers. The imprisoned farmers appealed to the Massachusetts legislature to help them pay their debts. The members of the legislature, however, were mostly lawyers and merchants who paid little attention to the farmers' requests. The legislators voted to raise taxes. This decision further burdened poor farmers. The angry farmers had just recently experienced the power of revolt in the Revolutionary War. In 1786, they blocked the entrances of several county courthouses to stop the legal processes required to take the indebted farmers' land. Rebels attacked jails and released farmers who had been imprisoned. Daniel Shays, a Revolutionary War captain who was now a struggling farmer, led the rebels. A group of Shays' men attacked a state arsenal, a building where weapons are stored, in 1787. A local militia defeated Shays' forces as they attempted to seize the weapons. 4 men died and 20 more were wounded. Shays' rebellion persisted nonetheless. As the rebels continued to cause havoc in the state, the governor of Massachusetts, John Hancock, sent more than 4,000 troops to stop the rebellion. Badly outnumbered, most of Shays' men fled. The Massachusetts government captured and sentenced 15 rebels to death. 2 of the accused were executed, while Hancock pardoned the rest. Daniel Shays left Massachusetts for New York, where he returned to farming. So this says Daniel Shays and his supporters protested the high taxes. In the end, the Massachusetts government easily stopped Shays' rebellion. The event, nonetheless, cast doubt over the Articles of Confederation. Wealthy Americans wanted a government that could protect their property against rebellions. Farmers needed a government that could print money and make laws on trade. The writers of the Articles had tried to avoid creating another overbearing national government, such as the British Parliament, which had passed laws without consulting with the American colonies. As a result, the states did not always think of themselves as a united country. The nation's early leaders began to make plans to change. They wanted to act fast to avoid more rebellions. Members of Congress met to discuss how best to strengthen the Articles of Confederation. Eventually, they decided to hold a conference to change the document by which the nation was governed. Henry Lee Jr., a friend of George Washington, explained the need for change. And so this is the primary source in their words from Henry Lee Jr. The period seems to be fast approaching when the people of these United States must determine to establish a permanent, capable government or submit to the horrors of anarchy. The decay of their commerce leaves the lower ordered unemployed. Idleness in this body and the intriguing exertions of another class whose desperate fortunes are remediable only by the ruin of society. So this was from Henry Lee Jr. to George Washington on September 8th of 1786.